There were 1,836 auctions held across Australia on Saturday, returning a clearance rate of 51.6%. Sydney held 887 auctions with a clearance rate of 50.5%. There were also about 1,660 private sales in New South Wales. Melbourne held 390 auctions. That was lower due to the Melbourne Cup holiday tomorrow. The clearance rate was about 59%, and there were roughly 1,300 private sales in Victoria. Brisbane held about 100 auctions with a clearance rate of roughly 44%. There were about 1,100 private sales in Queensland. Adelaide held 94 auctions with a higher clearance rate there of 67%. There were 281 private sales. Canberra held 58 auctions with a clearance rate of about 57%. There were 118 private sales. And Perth only held 3 auctions, but there were 612 private sales in Western Australia. Well, for more on this, I'm joined by Eleanor, Creagh, Senior Economist at REA Group. Eleanor, thanks for your time. Look, let's start with the auction clearance rates. How have they been tracking for the past few weeks?
Yeah, look, we've certainly seen that with the uplift in auction activity that we typically see throughout the spring selling season, which we have seen this year, and also that the uplift in auction activity relative to last year. It's been a busy spring selling season this year. We've had a lot of auctions, and we have seen that clearance rate has dropped back slightly with that uptick in the number of properties going to auction. That's something we would expect. But we are maybe starting to see, I guess, a little bit of relative weakness emerging in Sydney's auction market. We can see that auction clearance rate has pulled back to the kind of closer to 50% level after sitting really consistently above the 60% mark for quite some time this year.
You look at those numbers, and Adelaide pretty good at 67%. Is that just because there's fewer stock in Adelaide, or is that market doing pretty well at the moment?
So Adelaide certainly remains one of the capital city markets where we've got that relative strength. That's still holding on. We're consistently seeing that Adelaide is one of the top performing housing markets in the country, and we're consistently seeing that pace of price growth is stronger in Adelaide as well. Now, South Australia typically isn't really an auction market. We usually tend to think of Melbourne in particular and Sydney as those really auction heavy markets. But certainly, I guess that stronger clearance rate in Adelaide reflective of the relative strength in market conditions in Adelaide.
Another place that's not really an auction market is Perth and WA, but we just saw the private sales figures. It looked pretty strong over the weekend.
Yeah, that's certainly the case. I mean, we're seeing that, again, Perth's housing market is consistently the strongest in the country. That's been the case for much of the past 2 years, with home prices in Perth up a little over 20% over the past year, and prices continuing to lift in October. Though the pace of growth has slowed, it's easing off from that much faster pace we were seeing throughout the end of the summer selling season earlier this year. But we're still seeing that Perth's housing market is characterised by strong home buying demand and pretty tight supply on market. So although we've seen the pace of new listings hitting the market has increased in Perth, amidst that strength in home buying demand that we're seeing in Perth, we're seeing that total stock on market still remains pretty constrained. And as a result, that's fueling more competitive conditions and continues to fuel a stronger pace of home price growth in Perth, despite that slowing since earlier in the year.
All right, what about, we've obviously Melbourne Cup tomorrow. That was one of the reasons why there was less stock in Melbourne last weekend. But what are you expecting over the next couple of weeks with stock on the market?
So we've seen that this spring selling season has been busy. We've seen that the flow of new listings has picked up in every capital city market, and we're continuing to expect that that's going to be the case throughout the rest of this spring selling season. So this month, November, as that spring selling period closes out. Now, with that uplift in the number of properties hitting the market, we've seen that buyers have really been enjoying a lot more choice, and that is one of the things that has worked to slow the pace of price growth from that stronger pace we were seeing earlier in the year. Of course, we've also got affordability constraints with the consistent rise in prices we've seen over the past couple of years, and the sustained higher interest rate environment also weighing. But certainly that uplift in choice has worked to cool the pace of home price growth.
Now, there was some info out from the ABS last week around building approvals numbers. Were they a bit better than expected? Are we seeing more properties finally being built again in Australia?
So we are seeing that building approvals are tracking in the right direction. So we're starting to see a lift in the monthly number of dwellings approved. And certainly that is good news, although maybe not nothing to get too excited about yet, because if we annualise that monthly pace of building approvals, although we're moving in the right direction and it does look like we're kind of moving towards some semblance of recovery, we're still tracking well below that target that we would need in terms of the 1.2 million homes by 2029, and also well below the level that would be required by population growth.
Eleanor, Creagh, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.